All right, and welcome everyone to another episode of those smashing hours where we basically just get together to talk with wonderful, nice, cool, friendly, and very knowledgeable guests speaking about things. But it depends on you on what things you would like us to cover. So if you're interested in something specific, this is your chance to bring up your questions, bring up your opinions, bring up your thoughts, or anything. I will start kicking off, right? Because it's like only 1 hour, we don't have that much time. But then please feel free to just, whenever you feel like it, raise your hand or just write in the chat, and you're very welcome to go ahead and show yourself on video or on mic or not, as you desire. Now, our guest today is quite a character, if I may say so. Huh? Not bad, huh? I'm trying my best. So he dreams and breathes typography. He is from Austria and he's a freelance UI designer, but he spends a lot of time dreaming, thinking, writing, considering, pondering, reflecting, analyzing, studying, reviewing, recording, and also reading, I guess, about typography. Is that right, Oliver?
100% Vitaly. It's awesome to be here, and I really enjoy spending some smashing time with the smashing community after a wonderful conference in Antwerp 2 months ago. I'm not sure.
2 months ago now. Yeah.
Oh, it's already 2 months. Oh God, it feels like it's still in my heart.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like
So it was,
yesterday.
yeah. So for those of you who haven't been there, this was a very opinionated talk about typography, which got some people worried about their life choices. And maybe we will dive into that in a moment as well. But before we do that, I need to ask the question that I think bothers all of us, that lies deeply in our souls and our hearts. So, Oliver, what do we do with Comic Sans? Is there a place for Comic Sans in this universe, or does it belong in a trash?
There's always a place for Comic Sans, I guess, because
You guess. It's not certain then.
yeah, well, the thing with Comic Sans, um, it is. Let me tell you a little story. When I was bringing my daughter, I have three daughters, and one of them is still 4, and the others are a bit older, 7 and 9. And I brought the youngest to the kindergarten, and on the door there was a sign, and it said something about the, I'm not sure, summer party or something from the kindergarten, and it was set in Times New Roman.
Ooh.
And it was so off-putting, and I wish it was Comic Sans because it was not appropriate for that occasion, and it's more or less like dressing for the occasion. And there it would have been very appropriate, not Times. But when I'm thinking of what was it, I'm not sure, about somebody who was, I think it was a bookkeeper or somebody who sent me an offer or something like that, an estimate, and it was in Comic Sans. So then it's not the right time and
Not the
right
right.
place.
But
No.
this is another story, like, because I don't know if anybody is watching Fargo, the new season that just came out on Netflix.
I haven't.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Not yet.
So please do. It's like only the first 3 or 4 episodes are now out. So I highly recommend everybody to watch it. It's probably the best season I watched so far. But
Okay.
this might break your heart, Oliver. Yeah, it might break your heart because if I'm not mistaken, they're actually setting the intro in Times New Roman.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
And I also have to say it might look good if it's very large. It might look good.
It's yeah. I mean,
The problem with all these typefaces that we are very used to is that when we see them and we are very used to them, they are not very special. And also with Comic Sans, it's not, people are not sure if they don't like it because it's Comic Sans, because they recognize it's Comic Sans, because you shouldn't like Comic Sans, or if it is because it is of its intrinsic design features and
that's
things.
right.
Yeah, and I did a video recently on about Christmas cards and typefaces for Christmas cards, and I challenged myself at the end of this video about using Comic Sans in a decent Christmas card. And you have to decide if I have failed or not, but it was super, super tough to
I can
do so.
imagine.
Yeah,
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 it's actually funny because I think that the percentage of Comic Sans used in kindergarten signage is very high. I think it's almost like very close to 100%. But I think that this is not the only topic we're going to speak about today. Dear friends, I just want to invite you again to bring up your questions in the conversations. You want to make it useful, interesting for you. We can speak about Comic Sans and Times New Roman and Arial forever, but that's not the point. What is the point though? Well, maybe let's just go with, oh, here we go. Jan has just posted a link to Christmas fonts.
very well done. Correct.
Well, maybe Oliver, maybe you could guide us a little bit, like knowing that you've been spending so much time in your life with typography and you probably can tell apart, I don't know,
Arial
typefaces like
from Helvetica.
miles away from each other. I'm wondering, so we've been having a lot of conversations in the industry around, for example, the perfect font size or the minimum font size or the perfect line height or the line length. And it seems like at this point right now, everybody seems to be like, designers have opinions. And so sometimes you find kind of, I will say, an opinionated view on how typography should be, right, on some news websites and so on, going all the way to 140 characters per line because why not, right? If people want to, they can always resize, right? I'm wondering, what is your take in general about where should we be today? What's the minimum font size we should be going for? And what's the optimal line length we should be going to? Is it still the good old rules from 100 years ago that still persist?
Yeah, there are a lot of things that in typography, there are a lot of rules or guidelines that are kind of there. Not always are there is there science that backs it up. A lot of times it's what we are used to and what we are most accustomed to. And like just for example, 100 years ago, we all in Austria and Germany, we would have been used to reading the Kurrent style handwriting, or also the black letter, the Fraktur. And this is something we are not used to right now, and we are it's hard to read. It's not that it was super bad or not or illegible, but it was definitely trickier. And when it comes to line height and line length and font size, there are definitely some things that you should always keep in your mind. For example, font sizes, when we think of the browser and everything, the defaults are a good place to start. So I'm definitely signing up for this at least 16 pixels or 1 rem, but it always depends on the typeface again, because there are some typefaces that appear very, very small at the same size because they have different proportions or they have different vertical metrics. So these are all things that you should consider. You should always think of how it looks best. But starting at 16 points and even making it larger, I'm a big fan of scaling up the font size of body text on larger screens, because we can assume that people are further away from a screen the larger the screen is. Let's assume this. We don't know for sure, of course, but the smaller the screen, the closer we can be, I guess, and the smaller the typeface could be. But even then, I wouldn't go below 16, 14 pixels, something like that. And as an absolute minimum in UI design, something like that, maybe 12. But that's a very extreme. If
Yeah,
you
that's
think,
quite extreme,
yeah,
I would
that's
say.
super extreme. Maybe just for the tab bar or something in an app or somewhere there. I think it's even 10 in the tab bar in iOS and Android. So that's super, super small. But yeah,
Yeah,
I guess
so
people will make up their minds looking at the icons then.
right. So what would you say to people who find convenience and passion in setting 11 pixels on body on body copy?
11 pixels on body copy. Yeah, that's kind of tough, I guess. But
Yeah, well,
when I was in design school, I saw this, or I also taught at a design school in Vienna for a year, and somehow the young graphic designers back then, it was 10 years ago, always enjoyed using Lato in light or in hairline, super, super, super thin,
mm,
very small,
mm.
in light gray on a white background. it looked even more like a pattern of mystic symbols. It wasn't text anymore that you could read. But yeah, I think that's always the once you start learning about typography and these things, or about graphic design, you become aware of small details, and then you think, everybody sees this. Everybody sees the difference between medium and semi-bold. That's such a striking difference. But yeah, eventually you gotta come back again and think, no, it doesn't work that way. And yeah, if somebody said it in 11 point, I would say good for you if you can still scale it up.
Right,
Learn and repeat. Yeah.
Right. Well, Keith, and wonderful to see you here with us, Keith. Keith is wondering, hi, Oliver, are there any recent studies on font size, line length, etc. for the screen, maybe both on mobile and desktop?
Oh, hey, great.
Wonderful to see you, Keith.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, I think we chatted also in Antwerp.
We did.
Yes.
Oh, you
yes.
did. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was
fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. So about the line, there are two things. Recent studies. There's a very, very great resource. I think it's design regression or something, about a researcher, and she's pulling together, I think, a lot of meta studies about readability and all these things. And
Interesting.
about font size, I gotta look up the link, but about
Yeah,
font
I just
sizes,
pasted it.
That's good. Yeah, it's great. And what I remember from these things was mostly that a recent finding, what is quite surprising about the line length, there's always this saying that there's this ideal line length around 60 to 80 characters long. That's more or less what people claim that it should be. And she kind of found out that this isn't necessarily true, or it's not backed by science, from the studies. And that was more or less the essence. It explained in a lot of detail, and it has quite some time, so I don't remember exactly. But that what I took away from it was that we are probably used to this line length from book formats and things, and that's the reason why the people suggest doing it, because we're used to it. But then on the other hand, what the article did not cover was line height. But there's always in a relationship between line length and line height. And once you increase the line length, you should also increase the line height, because the place, seems kind of logic, because at the end of the line, and you have to travel a long distance to the next line, you could lose track of the line. And that's always super cumbersome. And it always should be possible to change this, or to adjust this. But I'm not sure about some recent studies about that as well. I'm not sure about anything with font size. So maybe design regression has some answers for you, then, Keith.
Yeah, thanks for the pointer. I didn't know about it, and I'm just taking
Yeah.
a look at it on the screen. It looks good.
Yeah,
Excellent.
nerd out on it. It's a good read. It's a long read. Long reads, actually. Yeah.
And I had a quick supplemental question.
Sure.
I teach at a university, so for my students, I've got quite a few old books, maybe 10 years old, 20 years old, on typography and web typography. What is the latest, or what are the newest the past few years? Is there a really good book that I can point my students to?
Yes, there's a great book you can use, and I think I got it here in the back. It is by Richard Rutter.
Okay.
It's Web Typography by Richard Rutter. And yes, it's even signed. Yeah, I got it signed. So, no, I really love that book, because it's very practical. And it's kind of, maybe there's this Bringhurst Elements of Typographic Style, which is the Bible, so to say. But this is the Bible for the web. And I think it's more accessible, and it's also more practical than the Bringhurst one, to me. So because it's very, very much focused around the concept of web and what technology can do. As it is a bit dated, maybe. Just variable fonts were just coming up when it got published, and there's also an update about that. But yeah, so the fundamentals and everything still is very, very well explained and very practical.
I
Okay.
also found Elliot J. Stock was speaking recently, and he mentioned that he is writing, or he's finishing rather, a book that is going to be published, I think, at some point next year. And it's called Universal Principles of Typography. I just pasted
Yes.
a link to it as well. I haven't seen it yet. I haven't read it yet, but it seems like this is something to watch out for. I remember Keith vividly, by the way. We can speak about Keith probably the entire session, because we had such a wonderful time at the university when I was speaking there, and the dinner afterwards, it was so nice and lovely. But I remember one conversation, Keith, that we had very vividly. I remember that conversation. We had a conversation about pixels, and specifically about setting font size in pixels, or like using pixel values or not.
Yeah.
And we were
I'm dead
arguing
against
about,
that.
sorry, what do you mean?
I'm dead against that.
Yeah. And so
Everything
he,
has to be relative for me, so I can
Yeah.
scale it up or down.
yes. And so Keith I wasn't really kind of aware of that at the time. And Keith was telling me, well, you should never use pixels, never, ever use pixels, because again, if you want to zoom in or things like that, if you want to increase the font size, it's going to be a problem. And I'm wondering at this point in 2023, if this still holds true, because didn't browser learn to kind of magnify automatically, even if you use pixels?
In the browser, you can zoom, right?
Yeah.
In Firefox, you can set the text zooming. You can set the zooming to zoom only text, and that's my little test for whether or not
That's a good point.
the page, because what I don't want is like geometric zooming, which basically just blows up every pixel.
Yeah.
And pixels. You can do that, of course, right? But I want to be able to pump up the font size, but leave the images in, unless of course the images are set in rems or ems or something.
Yeah.
It would also rescale. But
Okay.
yeah, I like to do control mouse wheel in Firefox with zooming set to text zooming. And then I can just pump up the font size. Like if I'm looking something at my TV, right, on a web page on my TV about 4 or 5 meters away or something.
Oh, excellent. Well, you see, this is like, I'm really bad at remembering people, but I remember conversations about pixels with people. This is what really works well for me.
It's weird, Vitaly.
I know. Tell me something I don't know. But maybe coming back to kind of the type stuff, right? I'm also curious, Oliver, just in general. So if you are setting up type, right? Where do you start at this point? Do you go ahead and use type scale by default, or a particular type scale? Do you, like for headings, for image caption, for body copy, things like that, depending of course on typeface that you have? Maybe you could actually shed some light about the process, and also maybe, if you don't mind, even sharing the screen and show some of the tools that you're using.
Yeah, I have to think of a recent project maybe, but yeah, I can maybe show you something from a recent project where I took a different approach, but yeah, and I wasn't happy with it.
Pixels?
No, it wasn't pixels, but
Okay,
it
just
was
checking.
actually, yeah, it was actually, but just as a quick intro before that, I think most importantly, you should decide for a typeface at first. So when you're choosing, the font is always at the beginning, because it will save you a lot of trouble later in the process. And if you change it later, everything will shift or not. It doesn't have to shift, but many times it does, because the metrics of each font are different. And what looked good in 17 pixels doesn't look good in 17 anymore, because now it's too large or too small or too wide or too narrow. And so make up your mind in the beginning which typeface you should use, and then you can just go with that. And this would be the first step always. And after that, I kind of start with the most relevant kind of text, because when it is a web design, which is very text heavy, I would start with the body text, so which would be a broad column or something like that. And always in desktop, when I'm doing the design, starting out with the design, because I find it much easier to reduce the design to its essence on mobile in the design process, compared to starting with a mobile design and then just having a very wide mobile design on desktop. It's just something that's harder to do. Not from conceptually. I think it's important to think mobile first when making up your mind which elements should be where. But from a design perspective, I never really could make it work starting from mobile and then moving to desktop when it was a responsive design. I'm not sure if anybody feels the same here, but yeah. And then when it comes to TypeScale and using things, at the recent project, this is maybe not a great case study, but I'm sharing my screen. So let me just pick Figma here and see. It's hard to find things. So there it is. So, and here in this case, it is based on Tailwind, and the developer is using Tailwind. David is designing it, and I downloaded the library or the whole thing from Tailwind, and it's got so many font sizes and stuff and everything. And just to make it easy for development, because it's using it, I thought, okay, let's change the font size and let's use the things that are already there from Tailwind. Let's start with that. But then I found out when maybe we should, I should make this a bit smaller maybe, because not everybody might have such a big screen. And also zoom the UI. Where is view, zoom UI, somewhere here, zoom. Super interesting interface scale. I'll make it larger. Very good. So, but you can see you have a lot of different styles. You have X small, base, large, in all the various sizes and everything, and relative line height and so on. And I wish I would have thought of it this time earlier, and I wish I would have done it the same as I always do. I just start with one style, and then I add another style when I need it. But I didn't, because it was there and I just used it. And it ended up with so many different styles, so many different weights. So I had to go through all the designs again and kind of fix them for the UI design then here. And what I also figured out was that it kind of, there were so many styles, and then when which was my work today, when I then pulled it all together and used it in one in one screen. Let me just find it. Yeah, there it is. I just like to do things like this, where I kind of show the different stylings, and it's still not so little stylings. There's still quite a lot going on. But when it comes to the UI stuff, it's not a lot. It's just some 14 pixels in regular, in bold, then in a link style, and then a very small one. It actually ended up with 2 font sizes, and that's about it. And for the text sizes, there were a bit more variation also for the landing page and stuff. But that's about it. And I wish I would have started earlier with just one style and then adding another when I don't need it. Yeah, for this project, I tried out with Tailwind. It's always, I'm not sure how others experience this. It's always great to work in an existing framework, but then you kind of feel drawn to use what's there. And
yeah,
I
kind
also
of locked into it, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I also ended up with a ton of different grays. I used cool gray, warm gray, blue gray, and gray. all in different shades. So yeah, I had to get rid of it at the end as well. So my approach would be, for anybody, start with the base size, maybe just regular, and then bump it up, use the other styles, and if you feel like it doesn't work that well in that size or in this size, change it. And a good tip also is, when you use something that's smaller, use it in a stronger weight, because the smaller it will be rendered, the harder it will be to read. So you could increase the weight of the characters just by, let's say, 500, font weight 500 or something. And what we also found out in this instance, I'm using a fig tree for the body text or for the UI text, and I'm using Heptaslab, which is just a gorgeous typeface. Come on, look at that euros, and it's very cool. Yeah, and what I like most about it when I designed the landing page here, I just love these ligatures. It's a lot of character, and I really like this. So this is just a way how the typography can just convey something. It's not a lot going on. It's mostly text and some shapes and some gradients and stuff, and yeah. And I think you can really do a lot with typography here in this case. So yeah, this is just what I really enjoyed picking there. But yeah,
I think actually the typeface here reminds me of Sentinel.
Of Sentinel?
You know?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's the thing here is Heptaslab.
Yeah.
Heptaslab is definitely something it's got something very sturdy Western style. It feels because it's very confident, and yeah, it is something that will differentiate this app, James, from others on the market, because it isn't using something else, like for example, like everyone, like SF Pro or like
Open Sans or something.
Or Open, exactly. And there it has much more personality. Yeah.
I'm wondering though, so we have often conversations about whenever you start designing in Adobe XD or in Figma, that you actually end up with an experience, let's say, that when transferred to the web to actual HTML CSS prototype will look different.
Yes.
I mean, there is a massive difference between Adobe XD and the web browser for sure. How do you manage that or tackle that? Do you need to be aware of something? So how do you consider that before you, when you make your design decisions?
Yeah, that's true. So I try not to lose myself too much in my tools, because eventually it has to look good in the browser or on the platform or whatever. The problem with Figma specifically is the anti-aliasing, because everything is very smooth and everything seems very crisp and sharp because of that. I use a very kind of default or cheap office monitor when I do design, because I do not want to fall in this trap of my Retina display. When I'm having a super high-end device here, but not everybody who is then accessing the site is having the same. And it will look better on a crisp display for sure. But designing it in an environment that's a bit harder to look at, or where you really have to make contrasts clearer because the display isn't that bright, will make it more resilient, I think. And when it comes now to dealing with the differences between, for example, Figma and the browser, we already found out that the font weights are very, very, very off, depending always on the typeface. But in this case, Fig Tree I'm using for the UI text. And when I'm using font weight 400 or 500, it is much too bold in the browser. So we really have to go one weight lighter in the browser because of the rendering. Yeah, and eventually what the browser does counts, and how it looks counts, and it will look different on Safari, on Chrome, everywhere. Everybody's using different renderings for the typefaces, and that's a pain, but people then again will be used to it on their device, and so they will not notice. It's only what I will then notice, and I think it's kind of a wasted time to spend too much thought on, oh, this is 1 pixel too thick.
Yeah, I'm also wondering, and by the way, dear friends, again, would like to encourage you to bring up your questions as well. I can just keep going. I have so many questions I always want to ask, but my questions are not as important as yours. So feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand here in Zoom, and I'll bring you up as well. But one thing that has been on my mind lately, because I've been having a conversation with a friend, and he said that, well, what are we going to do with vertical written? Because I remember like 5, 10, 15 years ago, there was this massive frameworks around like that every image should be perfectly aligned, and you have to have this perfect vertical rhythm, and then as it's kind of goes and flows, and you have the spacing, and all has to play along, and the headings, they all have to play along, so you actually have it very much like you do in Adobe InDesign back in the day.
Yeah.
Where are we now? Did we give up on it, or is it still very much the part of every good typographic experience?
I didn't give up on it, Vitaly. But
That's
this is
good,
one
I
thing
guess.
I really enjoyed about this project, because of Tailwind there and Figma's ability to use variables since a few months, that you can really just use these variables for spacing. And I really love that, because the spacing is always very crucial. It's the font sizes and the spacing. And when you set something, you do not have to make it super strict. I really tried to use a baseline grid on my site back in the day. And it was such a pain. It was just such a pain. And the maybe taking a step back and reflecting why vertical rhythm or why these guidelines or these baseline grids are important at all. Maybe they are not important at all, because when you take a look at a book, for example, here in this book, you need a baseline grid. Why do you need a baseline grid? Because when you flip the page, you will see if it's a book that's mostly around text, not images. But if you flip the page, then you will see if the lines are off, slightly off. And this is annoying because you have always different starting points and things. And depending on the opacity of the paper, it is always a pain, since then things might,
Overlap,
you
like
might
from
see them.
you might see them through. Yeah.
You might see them through. So this made a lot of sense, or makes a lot of sense if you print something. And then when I'm doing something to print, I'm always considering this. There, it makes a lot of sense for a brochure, for a book, anything like that. But when it comes to the web, you do not flip the pages that way, of course. You just scroll. And why is this vertical rhythm then relevant? It is because you want to show the relationship between these individual elements. You want to show what is closer together belongs together. And you want to kind of tie things together with a system or something. And this might be helpful in production, because if you know what the system underneath it all is, it might be easier to make a new component and make up your mind why you should use this or that or something like this. And when I'm doing this, I'm focusing around the baseline. So when it's a text heavy site, and I'm sorry, not the baseline, the line height, and it's, let's say, 24 pixels or 1.5 or so, rems or something like that, is then the baseline. We would say the baseline is the line height. Then we could use multiples or fractions of that unit for, let's say, before a heading or after a heading or something like that. But I wouldn't take it that strictly with a grid underneath it. Just know when you use a heading. That's also, maybe I could also briefly share the screen again, and how you might apply this just for a text site here. What I used here was I added some space before it, before the H2. So you always have a little extra space that you know that the H2 belongs to the paragraph that is following, or the H3 or something like that. And this is very helpful, because if it wasn't there, let's just remove it and see how this will go. Sure, how did I use it here? I used the variables here. This was cool. So you will still get it. You will still get that this is the heading for the following paragraph and not for the one before it. But it's not that clear, isn't it? So
yeah, that's, I mean, spacing is good to structure and kind of show relationships for sure.
Definitely.
Okay, so you're very much like in the camp of let's try to respect the baseline, the vertical rhythm as a minimum, at least.
Yeah, just repeating things and making a system out of it that you can reuse in a way, that, because somebody will make these decisions, or somewhere these decisions will be made. maybe the frameworks or the tools or Tailwind or anything will make them for you with the default template or something, then all good, all good. Just be aware of them and change them at some places where you think it looks off or it's strange.
Silvia is wondering, do you ever recommend using a modular scale for type and or spacing as opposed to fractions?
These are two things then, because for the vertical rhythm, I wouldn't use this modular scale thing. I would use fractions of 1 unit as an idea, and multiples of 4 or multiples of whatever. What do you want? Just as an idea. What's easy to come up with, and when it comes to modular scale, what I experienced a lot was always, I always tried to a perfect fifth or whatever, or major file. I used it always, and the problem was always, at some point, it becomes much, much too big. It's just too big. You know that there's this magical number in the background. It's the golden ratio, and it's all good because it's this golden ratio and it's golden. But yeah, it never really felt right at a certain size, because when you then again, I'm sharing my screen, I guess, because
Please
there's
go ahead,
this
sure.
site for modular scale. Which is it? Modular
It's
scale.
fluid. No,
Give me one.
no, it's
Literally.
yeah, there are I think 2 or 3 of them. I guess it is also modulascale.com or
Typescale, I think. Yeah,
typescale.com.
typescale.com. Something. Yeah. So I'm looking it up and then I'm sharing my screen.
Yep.
Yeah, it is Typescale. Okay, let's take a look at that. Share. All right. So, and when I'm now, for example, here, this kind of works. What do we have here now? We have this minor third. But when we start out with our basic, with our one rem for our body text, and I really like doing, as Keith said, the relative units. This is just gorgeous, because once you scale things up, also the spacings should always be relative, never in pixels. And once you scale things up, then everything will adjust fluidly. But you could, for example, H1 will work perfectly for desktop, but it will never work on mobile, because it will be too large then. And then you got to change. What do you do then? Do you change the modular
Clamp,
scale?
I guess.
Yeah. Or use clamp and then it's off again. And just again, it's not about creating the perfect system. It's kind of giving you some guidelines and ideas that will give you some basics for making up your mind. You can come up with anything as long as it looks good. And if you need or want a system in the background, some people need and want that. I also appreciate that. But at times you gotta break the system because it doesn't work there. And for example, when you then the minor third works, but this perfect fourth, always horrible, because just imagine you have then here, this is not enough contrast to your body text, but then you would have here, let's say, how many levels do you need? Let's say 3 or something like that. And then you have here one heading 3 or 4, then you have 3, 2, 1, and it still is very, very large here in comparison to the body text.
Right.
Yeah. So I like it to come up with things, but then I change it again. So it's always like, it's like with ChatGPT. Give me something and I'll change it later.
Right. Well, it's funny that you brought up typescale, because you have the font Inter in there. And there was a question that we have Dominic asking, what do you think of the new Inter 4.0 update? And he also posted a link to the Twitter.
Okay.
Maybe you need to share again now.
I'm sharing again. Sharing is caring.
Just never stop sharing. Just keep sharing.
I keep sharing what I have. So
Exactly.
I just gotta open up the chat again. I'm so new to this computer stuff.
Are you?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Inter. Yeah, we can maybe just take a look at the site directly, I guess. I really liked Inter a lot back then when it got released, and it was fresh and new and it was awesome, and it's a great typeface still, but it is so popular and so overused that it's not very distinct anymore. And you could say this about Fig Tree as well, which I used in my UI design. I also could have used Inter maybe, but it's got a different vibe on Inter. The thing with Inter is it is this very sober, rational sans serif style, this grotesque, new grotesque style. We know from Arial, we know from Helvetica, we know from Roboto, we know from SF Pro. This is super trendy and it doesn't seem to stop. Why, I don't know, but it is accompanying us for, I think, 10, 15 years now. And it will drop, and then things will become popular again more, that will be organic like everything, or everything will be possible. But I really appreciate that there are new weights and styles. I think somewhere there was the light style here, the thin style was, I think, the addition that was made, because you can now use it in a larger size and it still looks kind of elegant if you adjust the spacing, because the larger you set it, the tighter you also have to set it. And it looks very elegant. And again, you can use Inter and make it super versatile, and really like the organic, the organic style which is used here. So it is giving a different flavor to something we are already familiar with. And I think that's a good thing overall, because people will have more variety. They just gotta make up their mind and take a look at the existing styles and the other styles. And for example, when you take a look at all these alternatives, so the single story A, the L with the serif, this chopped off a crossbar of the T and the serif of the T. So there are a lot of things that are very interesting, and also when it comes to the alternates that make it more legible and distinct. When you're using Figma, Inter is the typeface used for the interface, and of course they use it in different. They use different sets, stylistic sets for that, to differentiate between an uppercase I and a lowercase I, so the I then with the serif, which is not the default one. So that was the cool thing when Inter got released, because they thought about, or Erasmus thought about all these things, and applied all these things, their fractions, alternates, and so on. And now I think it's moving more into this display style. And so more variety, I really like it. However, you could still make something very interesting with this typeface using this variety if you're not always using the same approaches and styles.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Also, there was a follow-up question from Keith, actually.
Mm-hmm.
In what use cases would you prefer to use to set font sizes in Ms rather than Rems?
Font sizes in Ms. Okay, maybe in cases where it should relate to a parent directly. Just for example, when I would set a tag or something next to a heading or something like that, and I always wanted to be the same in the same relation, because then Rems would I always that's always the thing. Do you use absolute or relative line heights again? I'm a fan of relative line heights. Other people love absolute line heights and want to have these strict units. But well, because for example here, when I take a look at this one, you see that the line height is also reduced, because the larger you set it, you need to make it more compact. And here it's 1, it's exactly 1. But in some cases, you might want to use line height 0.9, because you have so much space above and beyond a character that you want to make this more compact for the heading. Also here, the letter spacing got reduced. So if you just set this by the default units, like let's say here, for example, 1. I think 3.5 is the browser default, not sure about that, but it falls apart, you see? It's just not that appealing anymore in that size. And what I also, of course, for the letter spacing, you're using Ms and not Rems, because it's relative to the size of the typeface. Yeah.
I was also wondering, recently there was, I mean, not recently, I think it was maybe a year ago now, when I stumbled upon Proportio.app, right?
Okay,
And everywhere you go, everybody would be saying, well, this is the tool to use to have this perfect relationship
interesting.
between type, iconography, and all. But also comes up with these ideas about what should be the, how they should be connected. And you can also set up the scale on the left.
Ah, okay,
And
cool. Yeah,
and stuff. And so if you want to, let's say, match the icon's size with the type size, kind of
hmm.
get that. Have you used it? I've seen many people using it. I haven't on my own.
I haven't either because I just found out about it. Looks like a cool
Okay.
tool, Vitaly.
Ah, I see. Excellent. Well, you see, but I found a lot of people being very, very excited. But you can also look at the top here. You can also try
Yeah,
and turn on like a look at shapes and components and things like that as well, all the way
yeah.
on the top,
Ah,
right?
yeah.
So it kind of gives you
Ah, okay,
this
okay.
kind of almost systematic approach to both spacing and typography and components as well.
Yeah, that's basically somewhere you should come up with this. You can make up your mind just how you feel about it. But then again, maybe a system is something you could use or that's helpful in this instance. And when I'm using icons and I also want the icons to be more or less the same weight, the stroke of the icons to
Mm-hmm.
have the same weight as the text, depending on the size again. And there are also some great typefaces that already contain some basic icons that you can use then in the design. And I have, for example, a UI design checklist where I also point out some typefaces that come with these things. Smashing offer, by the way.
Yeah, it's
There's a
very
discount.
recommended. It's a really, really good one as well.
Yeah.
Talking about choosing typefaces, I'm wondering about something else. We had a brief discussion about that at in Antwerp as well.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting to see that if you look at, let's say, Google Fonts, it has some special fonts for like Atkinson Hyperlegible, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I see some people like taking it as the most accessible option and just using it. And then
Yeah.
there is also the one for dyslexia. I think it's Lexicon or Lexant or something, I think.
Lexand
Lexant.
is, I think,
Was that
was
the
this
one? I'm not so
open
sure.
this Lex? It was, no, I don't think it's Lexand, but
I'm not sure, but
this,
I mean, in general, what
yeah.
do you think that there is? I mean, the question I guess that I'm asking is, what would be the right way to use it? So if you wanted, let's say, to improve accessibility, should we just go in and say, let's just pick a decent typeface and call it a day? Or at which point would you say, okay, we're going to have an extra option, like you can
Yeah.
turn on or switch, let's say, to
To,
hyperlegible or to
yeah. Yeah.
dyslexic font?
Yeah. My approach here is you should make it as readable and pleasant as possible, but it's not so easy because all these typefaces come with a certain flavor. And there are two categories, I think, because one category is you can say if you're visually impaired or if you have something that is more on the mental side when it's dyslexic. You could have both conditions, of course, and it's not you're blind and you can't read. It's a
Yeah.
great space in between there. And what I found out recently, because my approach to this topic or to the accessibility thing at all, when it comes to typography, because you get a lot of myths, and especially when it comes to typefaces, there are a lot of recommendations that come up, like, for example, you should not use a serif typeface, you should use sans serif because it's better, and why, I'm not sure. And I don't want, why are they taking my serif typefaces away from me? I thought then, and but there's no rule, there's no success criterion that says you use a serif typeface. You do not pass double A or something like that. So it doesn't go that way. But then again, when you think of, for example, yeah, let's say you think of this dyslexic or made for dyslexic typefaces, like here, open dyslexic or something, dyslexic. Just let me quickly look at it. Ah,
You have feelings, I can tell.
ah. So this is something, if it works for some people, that's great, okay? But the thing is, there's a great study from the readability group, which did a very big survey, I think 8,000 participants. And what they found out that even people that said that they were dyslexic, they did not prefer this one over, it was an uptick. They slightly liked it better than the other groups, but it wasn't the best typeface for them. It still was beaten by, I think, Roboto or SF Pro or something like that, which was also more appealing. Because the downside, if you really use that as a default typeface for your web design, and I guess nobody's going to do that, depending on the vibe you want to create, of course, because it doesn't look very appealing. It looks broken and strange.
Yeah.
And if this fits to your project, then use it, and you're open this, and you're working for dyslexic people slightly better, maybe. But then again, I think it is very off-putting to everybody who is also using it or taking a look at this site, because it's just like visual
Yeah, you have
rampage here.
opinions. I can tell. Yes. There was also a nice conversation going in the chat, by the way, where Silvia mentioned that we were talking about the RAM and AMPs, right? And Silvia was mentioning that one use case is if you are mixing fonts in a paragraph and need to balance them, for example, a monospace sort of font to designate code terms, words, very common technical documentation. I think it's actually a very nice example indeed.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's a very good example, because then again, you need to make it relatively the same size, and depending on the X height of your or the lowercase letters height of your monospace font, you want to set this in the same visual size as if you have some inline code, for example. Yeah, it's a good one, very good one.
Yeah, so maybe one of the last questions, and I guess, I mean, maybe I should just stop in the meantime. If you, dear friends, have any questions, please write in the chat or just speak up. That's fine. We're all friendly here. So I'm going to give you maybe 5-10 seconds to do that.
You can also say that Open Dyslexic is the best, and I will still stay for the rest of this.
Okay, excellent. That's good. That's good. Siri is saying, I think one good check for accessible typography is differentiating 0 and 0, 6, 9, and there is this famous, I think it was IL, I've forgotten what the type, what this kind of set of characters is, to just check, because Gill sounds will probably fail everything.
Yes, IL and, or it's not the number 1, uppercase I and lowercase l. These are the letters that one. I have a great example how you should not do it. Or there's a
I think it's a time when you have to start sharing the screen again.
Yeah, I guess. Save for work again. So the things here, the optician sense, this is the typeface that does everything you shouldn't do when it comes to legibility. Because when you're doing these eyesight tests, you want this to be hard to read, of course. That makes a lot of sense. But here, for example, the letters are all very samey and super hard to differentiate. And so you can, for example, see that the how things like the C, because of the very small aperture here, super small, it will turn into an O when it's blurry. So they created this typeface to make it more or less horrible to read, but you have this optician vibe. It's a cool typeface, but it wouldn't work for legibility reasons, because for the
so you wouldn't want to set that body copy on it.
No, definitely not. And I think it's uppercase only, so I think it would be very cumbersome. But here they explained how these things evolve. But optician sense, it's a cool concept. It's a cool idea. But there, I think you can really see how things shouldn't be, because can you tell or can you tell apart a C and an O, or a P and a B, or something like this? So because they made it super similar, or an S and an 8. So if you want this the other way around, take a look at this side.
Okay, excellent. Maybe let me just double check. No, there is no more question. But maybe the last one from my end then. I'm actually quite curious, because we know, we've been working with, or like we know that there are variable fonts and we can use variable fonts for a while now. And why, Oliver, why is that every time I look up at any code, even like if it's relatively newly launched website, there will be TTF and OET and WoW, but never or rarely, I would say, variable font. What's the deal there?
I'm not sure about this. I also find it super cumbersome because when you there was, I think, the Web Almanac, and it was from 2002 or something. And Jason Parmental wrote about it. And back then, the old days, 2001 or something, it's really old.
Yeah.
They said, use WoW 2. Don't even use WoW, because the browsers that only support WoW will most likely, there are no browsers that only support WoW. Use WoW 2 and EOT and SVG and all this other stuff. Throw it away. Just throw it away, because you get the majority of browsers just by using WoW 2. And so this is the one thing. The other thing with the variable font, well, it always depends on how many styles you need. If it's just 2 styles, you will most likely be better off with the static fonts, because it will be smaller. But when it's 3 or 4, then you will definitely save on bandwidth with the variable fonts. You only load one item, which is also great. What is coming into play here is subsetting as well. Because, for example, what I showed you earlier, Heptaslab, with these beautiful, beautiful stylistic alternates. These are not available or included if you download it from the Google Web Fonts helper thing, because they stripped it away there. You cannot download variable fonts from the Google Web Fonts helper thing. And I'm not sure about a tool yet, and I'm going to dig into this because I want this to work, where you can subset the font. We only need German. We only need it in not for a lot of diacritics and stuff, but we need these ligatures. And so we do not need Cyrillic. We do not need Greek characters. So this is all things that I'm going to dive into a bit more. And yeah, I think there's still a lot to learn about subsetting and reducing file size and this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's actually just recently I stumbled upon this. Maybe this will help you as well. There is this tool that's called Slice, because I was actually just wondering, how would you even subset a variable font at all? Is it even
that's
working?
the thing.
Because it's kind of, you have this multi-dimensional space, and how would it work? So apparently it's supposed to work. I tried it. It worked once. It did not work with another typeface. So I'm not quite sure if this is going to help or not, but there is I also pasted it in the chat difference. So you can take a look and see if this is viable, or this maybe helps. And I'm also going to paste in the link to it to GitHub. Right, this is the tool where you can actually download it and install it, and then see if you can do something with it. It's open source and free and stuff.
That's great. Yeah, if anybody here knows how to do this, I would love to hijack this person and do a video about this.
But in a friendly way, right?
Yeah, in a friendly way, always. Yeah. Always very
excellent.
charming.
Yeah, I think that we'll be very excited to see your wonderful videos on that. Oh, by the way, that's something I've forgotten to mention in the beginning. I actually specifically wrote it down, and I've forgotten to mention that, of course, Oliver is well known as a personality, as an entertaining personality on the internet, as he has been running his YouTube channel on typography, which is called Pimp My Type, for a while now. And he also runs a wonderful, wonderful weekly Font Friday newsletter, which is also worth recommending and worth subscribing to. And then he also has some friendly checklists that you can download and buy as well. Very nice stuff. And a huge number of articles that he just writes around things. Well, mostly with his very opinionated view on typography. And some of the typefaces that he likes or dislikes. And he's very open and honest, and sometimes, well, mostly constructive about that. Did I miss anything, Oliver?
No, you summarized this perfectly, Vitaly, and I should hire you to do it always.
Well, that's not a problem. I can also just give me a call, and then I'll be happy to provide my services. Well, with this, I think we're at the end of the hour. This is how fast the time goes by when you speak about typefaces with Oliver. Oliver, do
It
you
is.
have any parting words of wisdom to those of us who are struggling with anything typography, like anything
Yeah,
related to typography?
my words of wisdom are just to go for it and to try it out and to use it and to, yeah, pick one topic that you're most uncomfortable with or that you're most bothered by. For example, font size, or maybe it might be font choice, or if it might be line height or line length or something like that. Then pick one topic and try to make it the best as possible for in your next project, and then pick another subset and just evolve, because it is not something that's super strict. There are so many rules that seem to be super strict, but eventually it has to look good. The work I did years ago is horrible. The work I did yesterday is horrible.
So nothing changes really.
Nothing changes really. Your taste. That's also the thing. If you really are into a thing and you learn and you evolve, also your vision changes and how you see things. And this is the great thing about learning and the visual field. So I just want to encourage you to go for it, try it out. Even if it's just a new typeface that you find cool for your headings, use that one and then change it if you don't like it in a year or something.
And just to wrap up, so just so we understand it correctly, there is a space for Comic Sans as well in the
There
universe.
is a space, yeah. Look at the Christmas fonts video. So,
Yeah, I think we'll have a lot of opportunities to do that in a couple of weeks as they're coming up. Well, thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your wisdom and your insights with us, Oliver. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I hope that you had a wonderful time. And if you have any questions, you know how to reach Oliver. He's very responsive, very friendly, and usually replies almost immediately, but also with a very, very, very strong point of view and very strong opinion as well. So be aware of that. Beyond that, I hope to see you again soon in other smashing hours, and we have conferences coming up, of course. And if you are a member, thank you so much for being a member and staying with us and supporting our work. We sincerely appreciate that. If we don't meet this year anymore, then have a wonderful holidays. I hope you have enough time to spend with your friends and relatives and maybe total strangers and neighbors and everybody together. As long as everybody is friendly and inclusive, then I'm all in for it. So have a wonderful time, everyone, and talk to you soon. Hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much again, Oliver.
thank you.